He forgot my birthday, 5 years in a row. No call, no message, not even my name in his memory. 5 years of silence, from the boy I raised with my bare hands, the boy I worked 2 jobs for, the boy I held when he cried after his mother died. And you know what's funny? I never wanted a gift, just a "Hey Dad." But when my 65th birthday came, and he forgot again, I realized something. He wasn't my little boy anymore. He was a stranger wearing my son's face. People told me, "He's busy, he'll come around." But years passed, and all I got were automated Happy Father's Day ads on my phone. Meanwhile, my heart just kept waiting. One night I sat alone in my kitchen, a single candle on a dry cake, and I whispered to myself, "You did good, old man, you gave him everything." But deep down I knew I gave him too much. I built his world and forgot mine, raised him to be strong, independent, but maybe also cold. And that night, when I blew the candle out, I decided, this year I wouldn't wait for his call. This year I'd give myself a gift, peace. The next morning I took out an old box from the attic. Inside were photo albums, report cards, and his first drawing. Me and Dad, stick figures with smiles. I stared at it for a long time, wondering where that boy went. Then I found a letter, my wife's handwriting. It said, "If he ever drifts away, don't chase him. Let life teach him what love costs." I folded the letter, smiled, and said, "Looks like it's your turn to teach life." For the next few weeks I cleaned my house, donated his old toys, and even sold my car, the one we used to fix every Sunday. Neighbors thought I was downsizing, but I was preparing for my exit. See, I wasn't dying, and not yet, but I wanted to disappear before I became another sad story. And if my son ever remembered me, I wanted him to feel it, so I wrote a note. "Ethan, if you're reading this, I'm gone. Not dead, just done waiting." Then I left my phone on the table. Screen cracked, wallpaper still his childhood smile, and I walked out the door without locking it. 3 months passed. No one came looking. No call from Ethan, no message, nothing. I moved to a small coastal town, quiet, full of old souls like me. Every morning I'd sit by the water, coffee in hand, thinking maybe I'd done something wrong as a father. But regret is a strange thing. It makes you question kindness. One evening, I saw a young man at the pier teaching his daughter how to fish. Her laughter echoed across the water, and it hit me. I'd never hear that sound again from my son. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept wondering, what if I just called him one last time? But pride kept my hands frozen above the phone screen. I had given him everything, now I'd give him silence. Days turned into months. Then one morning I coughed blood. The doctor said, "Stage 3, it's spreading fast." I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because I finally had a deadline. Now I knew how much time I had left, and what I wanted to do with it. I didn't tell anyone about the cancer. Instead, I called my lawyer, old friend, good man. I said, "I want to leave something behind for Ethan, but not money." He looked confused. "Then what?" I smiled. "A lesson." So we drafted a plan. Every year, for 5 years after my death, Ethan would receive a letter, each one tied to a memory, each one carrying a task. He wouldn't know it was coming. And the first letter would arrive exactly 1 month after my funeral. I recorded my voice too, slow, steady, calm, not to haunt him, but to remind him that silence has a sound. When I was done, I looked around my small rented house, walls covered with photos of us. Him holding my hand, him at graduation, him smiling at his first paycheck. And I whispered, "You forgot me, son, but I'll make sure you remember what love felt like." That night I wrote my final letter, addressed to the lawyer, sealed in an envelope that said, "Send only when the world feels quiet enough to be heard." A year later, I was gone. They buried me beside his mother, under the tree we planted together. I imagined Ethan standing there, cold, distant, maybe even bored. But he didn't come. No one told him. Months later, my lawyer sent the first letter. It reached Ethan's apartment, white envelope, no return address. He opened it half asleep. And inside was a single sheet. "Son, I'm not angry, but I am gone. You can find me where we left our Sundays." He frowned, confused, until he remembered the lake where we used to fish every weekend. He ignored it at first, threw the letter in a drawer. But that night something kept him awake. He said he could hear my voice, faint like a whisper through static. He went to the lake the next morning. The boat was still there, rusted, half sunk. On the seat was a small metal box. Inside, a tape recorder. He pressed play. My voice filled the air. "Hey, champ. If you're hearing this, it means I kept my promise. You forgot my birthday 5 years in a row, but I'll make sure you never forget this sound." He froze. For the first time in years, Ethan sat down and cried. The tape continued. "I'm not haunting you, son. I'm just teaching you the value of presence. Every missed call, every forgotten word. I turned into this moment." Then silence. And a second note appeared under the recorder. "Come back next year, same place, bring a flower." He did. Every year the lake had something waiting. A new letter, a new memory, a new ache. By the 4th year, Ethan stopped running from guilt. He quit his job, visited old neighbors, fixed the broken house, and sat in that same kitchen where I once blew out my last candle. He whispered, "Happy birthday, Dad," and for the first time in years, he felt heard. Year 5 came. Ethan drove to the lake again, but this time something was different. The air was still, the boat was gone. Instead, on the wooden dock sat an envelope, sealed with wax. He opened it carefully. Inside, a key and a note. "Final lesson. Go home, son. Open the drawer beneath the photo of your mother." He rushed home, heart pounding, hands trembling. When he opened that drawer, there was another metal box. This time newer. Inside, a USB drive labeled, "For Ethan, the end." He plugged it in. The video started. It was me, older, frailer, sitting on that same kitchen chair, smiling. "Hey, kid," I said softly. "5 years ago you forgot my birthday. But these last 5, I spent remembering you." He covered his mouth, tears already falling. I continued. "You've got your mother's smile, but my stubbornness. And both are curses if you let pride win." I paused, looked straight into the camera. "I forgive you, Ethan, not because you asked, but because holding pain hurts longer than death." The video ended with me whispering, "Don't visit my grave, visit the living." After that day, Ethan changed. He started calling people back. Old friends, estranged relatives, anyone he once ignored. He began visiting the town where I'd lived in silence. There he met an old fisherman. The man said, "Your dad used to sit right there. Never talked much, but always smiled when the sunset hit the water." Ethan asked, "Did he ever mention me?" The man smiled sadly. "Every day." That broke him. Right there on the pier, Ethan dropped to his knees and cried. For the boy he'd been, for the father he'd lost, and for the time he could never buy back. The fisherman placed a hand on his shoulder and said, "He left something with me. Said you'd come when the guilt was quiet." He handed Ethan a small wooden carving, a father holding his son's hand. On the bottom, carved in shaky handwriting, "Love isn't taught, it's remembered." Ethan kept it in his pocket ever since. After that day, Ethan changed. He started calling people back. Old friends, estranged relatives, anyone he once ignored. He began visiting the town where I'd lived in silence. There he met an old fisherman. The man said, "Your dad used to sit right there. Never talked much, but always smiled when the sunset hit the water." Ethan asked, "Did he ever mention me?" The man smiled sadly. "Every day." That broke him. Right there on the pier, Ethan dropped to his knees and cried. For the boy he'd been, for the father he'd lost, and for the time he could never buy back. The fisherman placed a hand on his shoulder and said, "He left something with me. Said you'd come when the guilt was quiet." He handed Ethan a small wooden carving, a father holding his son's hand. On the bottom, carved in shaky handwriting, "Love isn't taught, it's remembered." Ethan kept it in his pocket ever since. On the 6th anniversary of my death, Ethan visited my grave for the first time. He brought 2 flowers, one for me, one for the years he lost. He knelt, placed them gently and said, "I'm sorry I forgot your birthdays, but I'll remember your lessons." Every day, as he stood up, the wind carried a soft whisper through the trees, like a voice saying, "That's my boy." Ethan smiled, not out of sadness but peace. He finally understood. Forgiveness isn't something you give others. It's something you give yourself. So love has space to breathe again. He walked away slowly, leaving behind the guilt, the silence, and the pain. And as the sunset hit the lake, the reflection showed 2 silhouettes, a father and son, standing side by side, finally together, in memory and in heart. After that visit, Ethan didn't cry anymore. He started to live, not like a man carrying grief, but like a son carrying legacy. He fixed up my old house, painted the walls, repaired the kitchen, and framed one photo above the dining table, the two of us covered in grease from fixing the old car. Under it, he wrote, "He taught me how to build things, including myself." The neighbors noticed. They'd see him every morning feeding the birds, smiling, talking to the mailman, something I used to do. One day the same fisherman passed by and said, "You've got his eyes now." Ethan smiled. "Maybe I've got his heart too." That night Ethan sat by the window, looked at the stars, and whispered, "I hope you're proud of me, Dad." And if he'd listened closely, really listened, he'd have heard it in the wind. A faint, peaceful voice. "Always have been, son." Years went by. Ethan became a father himself. He named his son Michael, after my middle name. He promised himself he'd never let silence grow between them. Every night before bed he'd tell Michael a story, sometimes funny, sometimes sad, but always ending with the same line, "Don't forget to call your dad." When Michael turned 5, Ethan took him fishing to the same lake, the same dock. He showed him how to tie the line, how to wait patiently, and how to smile even when the fish don't bite. Michael asked, "Dad, did Grandpa teach you this?" Ethan nodded. "Yeah, son, and I'm teaching you." So he never really leaves. They sat quietly, sunlight bouncing off the water. And for a moment, it felt like 3 generations were there, father, son, and the echo of love. One night, years later, Michael found an old box in the attic. Inside were my letters, yellowed with time. He ran to Ethan and said, "Dad, what's this?" Ethan smiled softly. "That's from your grandpa. He left those for me when I was lost." Michael's eyes widened. "Can I read them?" Ethan hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah, maybe it's time he teaches you too." They sat together and opened the first one. As my voice echoed softly from an old recording, Ethan closed his eyes. The sound of my words, and steady, warm, full of life, filled the room again. Michael whispered, "He sounds kind." Ethan replied, "He was, even when I didn't deserve it." That night, they both fell asleep on the couch, letters scattered around them. 2 generations learning the same lesson, from a man long gone, but never forgotten. Time passed quietly after that. Michael grew up, Ethan grew old, and life repeated its cycle, but this time with fewer regrets. Ethan's house became a place of stories. Every guest who came in saw that framed photo, the one of him and me covered in grease. And under it the words still shined, "He taught me how to build things, including myself." Sometimes Michael would ask, "Dad, do you still miss him?" Ethan would smile. "Every day, but I don't feel sad anymore, because missing someone is just love that has nowhere else to go." And when the wind blew through the open window, it carried the faint smell of lake water and old candles. Ethan would close his eyes, take a deep breath, and whisper, "Happy birthday, Dad." The years were kind to Ethan. He never became rich, but he became something rarer, peaceful. Every morning he'd write letters to himself, not about regret, but about gratitude. He'd start each one with, "Dear Dad, today I learned," and end with, "Thank you for teaching me how to stay." One winter morning, he took his son Michael to that same lake, frozen now, silent. They stood there together, watching the sun rise over the icy water. Ethan said, "You know what your grandpa told me once? For that silence isn't empty. It's full of answers." Michael nodded slowly, not fully understanding, but feeling the weight of those words, and Ethan realized his father's lessons had finally come full circle. That night, Ethan sat by the fireplace, holding the wooden carving the fisherman once gave him, the father and son hand in hand. The carving had faded with time, but the message carved underneath still remained clear. Love isn't taught, it's remembered. He smiled, ran his thumb across it, and said softly, "I remember, Dad." Then he took a deep breath, opened his journal, and began to write one last entry. "Dear Dad, you were right. Life teaches, but love never leaves. I used to think you wanted revenge. Now I see you wanted peace. I carry that peace now, and I'll pass it on. He closed the book gently, placed it beside my photo, and whispered, "Lesson complete." Years later, when Ethan passed away peacefully in his sleep, Michael found that same journal. He opened it, read the first page, and smiled. Then he noticed something taped at the end, a letter he'd never seen before. Addressed simply for my grandson, he opened it carefully. Inside was my handwriting. Old, shaky, but still mine. "Michael, if you're reading this, it means your father kept his promise. I never met you, but I knew you'd exist, because love doesn't end with us. It travels, it becomes stories, voices, memories. Promise me you'll keep telling them." Michael wiped his eyes and whispered, "I will, Grandpa." Then he closed the letter, looked at the same old photo on the wall, and smiled. The same way his father once did. Years passed again. Michael grew into a man, and every time someone asked about his family, he didn't say much. He'd just point at that old frame photo and say, "They built me." One day his daughter asked, "Who are they, Dad?" He said, "Your grandpa and great-grandpa, two men who taught me that real strength is kindness." She smiled. "Did you love them?" He paused, looked at the photo, and said, "Still do." That night, Michael recorded a voice note on his phone, a story for his daughter. He titled it, "The Man Who Waited 5 Years for a Call." He didn't know if she'd ever listen to it as an adult, but he recorded it anyway, because that's how legacies survive. Not through blood, but through words. Generations moved forward, but the story never died. Each time someone forgot to call home, someone else remembered this story. Somewhere a son picked up his phone and called his father. Somewhere a father forgave his child before it was too late. That's how stories work. They heal what time tries to break. And if you're listening to this now, remember one thing: the people who raised you won't always ask for much. Sometimes they just want your voice, your time, your "Hey, Dad," because one day you'll be the one waiting for a call that never comes. So before you scroll, before you move on with your day, do one thing for me. Call your father. Text your mother. Say thank you. Say I remember. Because love doesn't need grand gestures. It just needs presence. I was the father who waited 5 years for a call. But in the end, I learned that love always finds its way back, even if it takes a lifetime. And maybe, if someone's listening right now, you'll call home tonight, not because you have to, but because somewhere, someone like me, is still waiting. The screen fades to black, and with the words, "Love is remembered, not forgotten,"